going to tell you about Tim. This is my best man speech, by the way. I'm going to reveal a few things about Tim that I've learned over the years. Mostly I didn't experience these things with Tim, I've just heard the anecdotes. And one of the things you realise when you try and pull it all together is that Tim is effectively the equivalent of Forrest Gump. Okay, he's had one of those lives where when you actually add all the bits together, it sounds slightly surreal. So as an example, he was the lead singer of a band and got into the charts, I believe, with A Song. Top 100?
I mean, not top 100, that is true, that is true, but yeah.
He's written a book, published a book, which he won't let me read because it's so dark. He's written and produced many plays, one of which is at the Edinburgh Festival this year. He's a DJ on Radio London at the moment. He has a love and hate relationship with most of the comedians in the UK, based on his earlier career. He's dated Hollywood actresses, international pop stars. The story goes on. I think my favourite one is probably the time he got locked into a sex dungeon with, I think, somebody from the South Korean government. Yeah. So there are some interesting stories that maybe over a drink he will reveal. So it's quite incredible when you piece them all together. So
Thanks.
I think that's probably a good introduction to Tim. What we're going to do is he's going to give us a view of the story from Time Out, from his perspective. Then we'll move into a bit of Q&A. And then if you want to grab him after that, feel free. And don't lock him in a dungeon now. That's what I'm doing. Over to you.
Yes, what great. Yes, most of those things did happen. And if I get distracted at any point, I will tell you the sex dungeon story. Hello, my name is Tim Arthur. I, up until November last year, or October, late October, early November, was the global CEO of Time Out. Before that, I was editor-in-chief of Time Out. Before that, I was chief content officer for Time Out. Before that, I started Time Out Live. Before that, I was comedy editor of Time Out. That all happened in 7 years. I went from comedy editor to global CEO of Time Out. I've been at Time Out, well, I had been at Time Out 3 times in my career. Time Out is an amazing place to work. I absolutely love it. And I go there, I work there, do a whole period of time, then leave, or try and leave. I leave for a couple of years, then I get dragged back in, and that's happened like 3 times. This time I think I'm out. This is what I think I'm out finally. I don't think they want me back. So what I thought I would do though is talk about these last particular sort of 5 years at Time Out, because it's been an extraordinary period of time. It's sort of the change process within Time Out has been like nothing I've ever experienced. But I think it's pretty common for what's going on in media and content. I think it's a fairly common thing, but it was a huge challenge for us. I'll start off with this, by the way. So this is a quote. For nearly 40 years, this story has given faithful service to the young at heart, and time has been powerless to put its kindly philosophy out of fashion. To those of you who have been faithful to it in return, and to the young at heart, we dedicated this picture. Did anyone tell me, just like general knowledge quiz to start off with, that is a quote at the start of a very famous film. What film would that be?
Wizard of Oz.
It is The Wizard of Oz. That's absolutely brilliant. It is The Wizard of Oz. There we go, Wizard of Oz. And the reason that I put that there is because it's very like Time Out's story. Time Out is 46 years old, I think, or somewhere around there, if anyone knows, somewhere around that area. And for more or less 42 years, it was one thing. If I said to pretty much anyone in the room, Time Out, normally the word they would say afterwards is magazine. And that's what it was known as. However, just when I took over as editor-in-chief, I was told that the magazine was dying. So the magazine's circulation had gone at a peak period of time in London. It was about 100,000. That was when Time Out was at its biggest. And a pretty influential magazine and brand, and a lot of people knew it, and it was growing globally. By the time I took over as editor-in-chief, our circulation was 36,000 and was going down 15% each year. Something fundamentally had to happen. And that was pretty much the first conversation I had with the CEO at the time when I took over as editor-in-chief was, this is busted, you have to go and fix it. And we had to face some really big decisions as to what the future of Time Out was. And I think probably what I'll talk about throughout the rest of this talk is how we came to make the decisions we did and what it needed us to have. One of the things, to use the Wizard of Oz analogy, that we needed and I think all business needs is brains, a heart and courage. See what I've done. See, I'm not an amateur, I've done these before, but it is absolutely true. And brains particularly, we needed to sit down as a group of people and work out how to turn round what was a much loved brand into being a brand that could last for another 40 years. And that was the biggest single thing that Time Out had at the time, still has, but was the one thing that we could rely on, was brand equity. People genuinely loved Time Out. People had long associations with it, they knew it, it was a recognisable brand, but we weren't delivering the kind of content in the way that they wanted it anymore. But we still had this sort of idea of love, and actually we punched way above our weight. We were still getting people coming doing interviews with the magazine, we'd have advertisers work with the magazine, that were way bigger than actually our circulation, our readership warranted. So we knew we had that. So we had to, the brains bit was to put together a team of people who could come up with a future model for Time Out, both in content and revenue, that would make it work. A heart is really important. I think it's absolutely vital to every single business, is that you know why you're doing it. You've got to love it. You've got to have a passion for the brand that you work for, and understand the heart of the business as well. What is the DNA of a business that makes it work? And in Time Out, that was something we had to go back and look at and not take for granted, because it's quite easy after a while when you've been working inside a business, especially one that's been going on for like 40 years, to go, oh yeah, well, I know what Time Out stands for, and I know how people perceive it. And actually, we had to really do this moment of going, let's just wait, and let's just stop for a minute and really evaluate that, and has it changed? How do we perceive Time Out within Time Out, and how does the audience perceive it? And then make sure those two are the same thing, and then how can we expand that? And then courage. And courage was because we were going to do some really big changes. We were going to do the kind of changes that if we got it wrong, oh my goodness, look at me. Not look at me, oh my goodness, look at me. Look at that. That's just, who's an ego? Me. Oh my goodness, look at me. It's a huge storm, but I'm fabulous. Courage, because we needed a board that would support us in some really big choices. So when it came to the magazine, we could easily, and it was absolutely an option we looked at, which was just to close the magazine down. Just to go, look, you know, the future's digital. We sort of had worked that out. We weren't that clueless. But we could have nursed the magazine out, maybe last another couple of years, and then just closed it down. That would have had an effect on the brand, though, and brand perception, and the idea of, oh, poor old Time Out, it's failing, you know. So we came up with a totally different plan that included print, that included digital, that included e-commerce for a way forward. But it did take courage to do it. And so what we had then is sort of what we sort of created or aimed to create, something about the platform delivering the best of city life. When I left, these were the kind of figures that we had, and probably a bit more. 39 million users around the world, 89 cities, 38 countries, and growing. And it was quite important that we were bought by private equity, and they wanted to see it expanding. They wanted to see scale to give it value. And they wanted to see that we could come up with a formula that was not only going to work in London, where we had great brand recognition, but that we could roll out right around the world. So what was Time Out? Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the magazine, because it was probably, for people who live in London, it was one of the biggest single changes that we did. And at the time I was editor-in-chief. So as I said, I came into the job, the CEO took me in and said, right, the magazine's sort of busted, these are your choices, you can close it now, you can close it in a couple of years' time, or you can come up with something new, some other idea. So we decided to go free, which I presume some of you will have seen it, and you'll have picked it up, hopefully, and you'll read it. That's the ideal. I'll talk very quickly, though, about this particular issue, because this particular issue became really, really key to the format and my thinking of the vision of Time Out. On my third edition, that I was editing, we were doing a piece about street art. And it had loads of kids in hoodies, like tagging up the city, and we were doing this whole piece about how valuable street art is actually, and it was brilliant. About Wednesday, the riots in London happened. And the whole city was on fire. And all the images on the telly was of people in hoodies just torching stuff. And we looked at our issue and went, there's no way we can put this one out. If we put this out, it'll just be really incongruous what everyone's experiencing in the city. We had that really weird choice that you don't very often get as an editor, that you see in films where you sort of go, stop the press, and then you realise the press isn't even running yet. But it was that kind of feeling. So I had to do this thing where I went, right, everybody, we got the whole editorial team together, and we sat down and went, we can't put this issue out, we have to start from scratch. And as anyone who works in content knows, if you're putting magazines together particularly, they're sort of like a beast that sort of goes on. You're already halfway through. To start from scratch again when you've only got 2 days, it's very, very difficult. But we were so committed to doing it because it would just look weird for us to put that magazine out that we did. We canned the whole of the magazine. We started again on Wednesday evening, late. Everyone stayed in late. It was really nice, quite a good bonding thing for us all. What we wanted to work out, though, was what was our response? How did Time Out feel about what was happening in the city? And that became a really key theme to how we created content, because it was really then became this whole mantra that was through Time Out from then right till when I left, and I think on now, is how does Time Out do it? It's really, really key, because you can do loads and loads of things. You can choose to go down loads of routes, but you always have to go back as a brand to, yes, but how do we do it? So we had to know what Time Out's voice was. And we sort of discovered Time Out's voice partly by doing this issue. We all sat down and went, right, what do we want to do? Do we want to do what all the other papers were doing, which was saying, terrible kids, they're just ruining the city, what's gone wrong with them, they're feral. These were the kind of words that were coming out, were feral, wild, unhinged kids. Did we want to do that, or did we want to go another route? And we sat down and we said, how do we feel about it as an editorial team? And actually the feeling was everyone just felt hurt. Everyone just went, why is this happening in the city that we love? And that was the sort of feeling. And then over the day that we started to put a load of people out to get features, the clean-up happened. And everyone was using the broom to kind of clean it up, and communities kind of came together. And we then came up with this tagline, which was hashtag I love London. So against everything else, all the coverage in the media at the time was really negative. And we went, actually, what we stand for as Time Out is we stand for being proud of the city and passionate about the city. And what we wanted to do is do this thing where we said, the greatest city in the world bounces back. So we focus almost entirely our stuff on how communities came together and positive voices about the city, why we love it, why it's an amazing city, why we should be proud of it, why we should try and help solve the problems, but not demonise people for it, and and get some of that London pride. And actually, as we were doing that, that became really formative to how we saw the brand. The brand at that point can happen quite easily when your circulation gets smaller and smaller. You start talking to a smaller and smaller group, and we had got a little bit too cool for school. It was a little bit hip, and we were really mainly at that point only writing for kind of like hipsters in Hoxton with their kind of, their girlfriends in vintage clothing. That's who we thought we were writing for. And actually I suddenly went, you know what, I don't want to create stuff for that. I want to create stuff for the whole of London. I don't see why anyone shouldn't interact with Time Out. I wanted it to be a mass publication that people loved, that could really help people find amazing things in the city. That's really what we stood for and what we still stand for. If we do our job well, all of you find something amazing to eat, to go and do, to see, that you would never have done and never have found before. And that's an amazing thing you can give to a city. It's a bit like, it's like an emergency service for your social life. That's what we wanted to build. So then we gave us the idea, we got very confident there with our tone of voice, it became really strong, very passionate, and people really responded to it. It should be said that that particular cover, the hashtag I love London cover, was the biggest selling cover for 10 years, biggest selling magazine. It really resonated, and that was the thing we had to work out, was how do you resonate with our audience, how do we get people back involved with the brand. Then I was challenged with the idea, anyway, the underlying business model was, do you close it or do you come up with something new? We came up with something new. We copied what was in the market already. So that, and I'm not ashamed of that at all. There was a good model that had already been proven in the marketplace that we went, we could do that, and we could do that better, actually. And that was the free market. There's a terrible word called freemium, which you may have heard, which I really hate, which is free premium, which is the idea that actually you give away content which is really good, but it's not free, it's not cheap. Actually, could you create a great magazine? And actually, I looked at, particularly at the time when I was looking at competitors, I looked at Stylist in the marketplace. I think Stylist is a great magazine. I still do. I think it's a brilliant magazine. Lisa, who edits it, is one of the best editors in the market in the UK today. It's absolutely brilliant. So we looked at what they were doing and sort of went, okay, we get how they're working. We could build something around there. And we decided to go into the free market. It was sort of helped by this. At this sort of point, I became very interested, and any of you are marketeers or have any marketing background, you may well know this character, Seth Godin. Anyone know his stuff? I'm like a massive fan of Seth Godin's, a bit of a geek boy with him. He wrote a book called In Search of the Purple Cow. If you haven't read it, do read it. It's brilliant, but it's really, really simple. Basically, the principle of the purple cow is if you look at a field full of black and white cows and one is purple, you will look at the purple cow. That, in its simplest form, is what it is. And it's actually about the fact that you have to be extraordinary. You can't just be normal, particularly in this marketplace now, where there's a white noise of media. You have to try and be extraordinary. And that was one of the things that we kind of came up with the magazine. We went, right, how do we make Time Out stand out? How do we make it new again? And one of the things that he's got, and this holds out really, this is a psychological thing, is that people only notice stuff when something changes. You have various moments in businesses where you're going to change it. That's when you're under the scrutiny of people. The reason that, it's actually psychologically hardwired into your brain, the reason that police sirens go nee-no, nee-no, nee-no is because if it just goes nah, you don't actually notice it. We are programmed to notice difference. And so what we wanted to do with Time Out is we knew we had this moment where we could reinvigorate the brand by doing a big change, but it had to be a strong change. And so we went into it and we looked at the whole way we were going to work. There we go. And this was basically what it was. So I'm sorry if it's probably a bit small for you lot, but I'll talk about it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Old school media business to a digital first social life support system. That was the kind of catchphrase we came up with. We lost that catchphrase quite a long time ago. But it was basically going, what would it look like? What would Time Out of the future look like? And it'd be creating products which were sympathetic and worked with each other and actually fed an audience between one product and another. So when we came to look at the magazine, we totally reworked it. We stripped out loads of the listings. So if you were to look at an old Time Out from 2011, and actually if you looked at it from 2011 back to 1974, they'd be almost identical. There are big, like a few features at the front and then huge listings at the back, like a phone book, a directory. And actually, when we started to ask people why they weren't reading the magazine anymore, that was really key for us, was asking our audience. Why weren't you reading the magazine anymore? They would say, there's just too much information. I don't get through it in a week. And actually what had happened, in the time period that we had been going, people's behaviour had changed. People are used to Googling something. They're used to going, I want to find that, there we go. And they get 6 or 8 results. And they choose from those first page. And actually, people think digitally, and that's how they expect to get information. And when we were overwhelming them with information, they were actually, some people said they felt guilty about not going and doing stuff. They were like, it's just too much stuff to do, and so I feel bad about myself. So we took, again, it goes back to the idea of courage. My decision was, okay, well, we'll listen to them. We will give them just the best of the city. The magazine won't be all of the city. It'll just be the best of it. However, if they want all of it, because that was quite key, they could go onto our website. So the website would be the mothership. That would hold all the information. And that would, again, you see, you'd Google that. When you'd go onto our search, just look for Italian restaurants in wherever you are, and you'd come up with the same kind of amount of search results that you'd get in the magazine, just a handful. But the magazine would act as our shop window for the brand. And it would have all the tone of voice stuff as well. That was one of the key things. Anyone who works in digital will know it's actually quite difficult to get really great it's not difficult, but it's done. Well, I would say it is difficult because a lot of people do it really badly. To get tone of voice over on a website, I think is much more difficult than it is in a magazine. Magazine, you can create the whole thing. It's a whole journey. You pick up, people spend time with it, you can do it. Actually online, it's quite difficult. They want information, particularly if it's an information-based thing. They want the information, they want it easy to find, and that's the main thing. So you can put gags in, you can put certain things in, but it's quite difficult to get tone of voice in. So we went with the magazine. We'll really hammer that. That's where all the key tone of voice is. This is what we stand for. And it was entertaining. It was meant to be entertaining and funny and useful. Those were the things we went for. We also knew here that, as you'll see on there, that mobile was going to be key. Mobile was how people were getting their information. Increasingly, during our period of time that I was there, mobile searches overtook web searches, from laptops or desktops. So it's obvious that that's how we had to put our information in. So we put a lot of stuff in. If you looked at the magazine as well, the other bit of re-engineering of the magazine was how many pushes we had to online. All the way through the magazine, it has, for more information, go and see this. You want to, enter this competition, here's a deal you can get on this. Red little stickers all over the place that pushed you online to make sure that you knew this is a multi-platform solution. It's not just one thing. there we go. So that was our mission then, became to be the world's leading inspiration platform and marketplace, enabling people to make the most of their city. That was too long. So then we went, or simply put, your social life support system. That if you could, if you just went, I want to do something tonight, I wanted you to think of Time Out. That was the kind of key. And that's still a challenge, by the way. Even though Time Out has grown massively, I would think, for most people in the room, it won't be your go-to. I would think still. You know, if there were 2 of you, that would be great. We had some very, very loyal Time Outers, but we needed to kind of grow that. And that's one of the things that, there are loads of ways of doing that we're working on at the moment. But that was definitely the mission that we're aiming at. And we would build that on 3 core pillars: users, revenue, and content. And understanding how these 3 work together was really, really key. Because if you're in any business, if you're a content business or a content-led business, if you're not working in utter partnership with users, which I would call marketing, really, or your revenue, if you're not one team, if you're separate teams, it's never going to work. You have to work totally. There is a sweet spot between the 3, right in the middle, where you all have to meet, and you all have to understand that you're working for the same purpose, and like the content team has to understand that without revenue, there's no product at all. You know, the content team also have to realise that without marketing research, you might as well just be masturbating. Like they're basically, the great thing about marketing is it can tell you what to create. What I had to do with my content team was say, right, we're going to do this like a relay race now. Marketing will tell you what to build, what the people want and what they're interested in. Then we're going to give it to content. Content will create that content, and they'll create brilliant content. And that's not marketing's job to tell them how to create the content. They just do the best content they possibly can. And then when that's done, they pass it back to marketing, and marketing then amplify it out there. And all the time, revenue must be involved. All the time, the sales teams must be involved going, you know, if you do that, we'll lose, you know, £10,000 from that publisher. You know, there's opportunities here. And actually, the closer I got, when I was editor particularly, I got really, really close to the commercial team, because I realised the closer I was, the more they could enable me to do amazing things. So I then became part of the pitching process for creative solutions and things like that, because I'd go out and go, I'd like to do, we did one project which was mapping the whole of the city. I wanted people, all our users, to take pictures of the city, so we could put a map that you could click on at any point, and it would pull up people's amazing insights to the city. And it had to be like, what do you find passionate about this particular area? You know, I wanted to do that anyway as a photo opportunity and an online hub. And then we went out and found, can't remember which one it was, Nokia I think it was, who became the sponsor for that project. We won loads of awards off it. But it was something where I got my head around the idea of, actually, if I come up with great ideas, I can find money for that. The commercial team will love it. I'll create content that I couldn't do without commercial support, and it could be a fantastic resource for our users as well. So those are the kind of pillars. But bringing those together at Time Out was not easy, and it was a huge cultural shift, because it had been content. If we'd done the old model with these 3 at Time Out before I started as editor-in-chief, content would have been right at the top, and content would have, you'd had the phrase "content is king," and what the editor said happened. So basically, if the editor went, "No, fuck it, I'm not putting whatever it is on the front cover," then everybody else in the building would have gone, "All right, okay, no, the editor said." That's not the case. While I was in post of editor, I dismantled that and said, actually, that's not how it has to work. Everyone has to work equally. They're equally important. There is no hierarchy. If we work together as a team, we can succeed. And the big challenge, of course, because we said we were going to become a digital business, was to work out how we expanded online particularly. One of the things we did was combine our content teams. We didn't have any mag team or digital team in a content sense. We pulled them all together. The only ones where that would be different, it would be designers, because the mag designers was quite a specific skill, and so we kept some of those, about 3 of those, to produce the magazine. But everybody else on the content team, all the editorial team, works equally across all the platforms. They also had to learn loads of new skills. This, to you guys, if you work in content now, this will just be natural to you lot, I would think. You will be multi-skilled, and if you ever want to have a career that continues for any length of time, I presume you will now be digitally focused. But we had a load of people that weren't. We had a load of what I'd call maybe legacy staff, people who've been with us for 25 years, who the idea where you suddenly said, and now you're going to produce X amount of digital content every single day, and some will be for a blog, and some will be for your bit of the website, and some will be for mobile, and some will be for e-commerce as well, was scary for them, actually. But one of the great things is, because of the way we did our content planning particularly, they could see results. And this was the kind of growth that we had year on year, which was, as you can see, it's about 40% growth year on year in audience, which really helps. Like, people like that. And one of the things that I learnt with content teams is that if you can show them they're succeeding, they love that. So this is basically the sort of growth. So that's pre us, really, and then we took over around 2012, and that's what happened digitally. That's what happened to our digital audience. And I had a thing which went back to this idea of marketing, getting marketing to tell an audience, tell the content team what to write, was I didn't have time, our content team didn't have time to be writing things that nobody wanted to read. And we had content, we had an amazing editorial team at the time who had been autonomous, who just liked writing stuff. And they would write 2,000 word articles about the latest Wim Wenders film. And those posts would get like 50 users reading it. And you just go, wow, you spent a day of your life writing that for 50 readers. Whereas actually, one, if you'd have understood SEO properly, you could have got more. Two, our marketing team could have told you that nobody cares about Wim Wenders anyway, so just do 200 words on it. Actually, they could also have told you that if you write 2,000 words, nobody's going to read it online. And particularly when it gets to mobile, they only want to read 50 words, and then they could expand if they want more. It was just teaching them different ways of working and integrating them and saying they're really important as well, that if they got this right, it would be amazing. And the effect was amazing. We grew content incredibly quickly. And actually, if you're a writer, I'm a writer, so I know, my background was from content, nothing is better for a writer than knowing that people are reading them. Would I rather 50 people read a piece I wrote about Wim Wenders, or 2 million people wrote a piece I wrote about somebody? I've got an ego. I'd love to have the 2 million people. So that's sort of how that transformed. One of the things we had to know, though, it goes back to that idea of how you create content and how you see businesses. I've become much more process-led over the years, was understanding who your audience is, who they really are. Without knowing your audience, don't start to write anything. Don't ever assume you know your audience. Do research. Always research, then write, or always research, then build if you're in product. But don't ever make assumptions and just start, because it always goes wrong. So what we did was loads and loads of research. And we did this, by the way, for the magazine as well as online. In fact, the magazine, we did loads and loads of research in a way that Time had never done it before. We did both qualitative and quantitative research. I sat down for, I don't know, maybe 10 sessions with user groups, just looking through the demo of the magazine, saying what works, what doesn't work. We listened to them, we made changes. Then when we launched the magazine, we had the same groups come back and we said, does this section work, does that section work, why isn't it? We marked sections of the magazine. So we had like, okay, what would you give out of 10 for the music section? I'd give it 4 out of 10, okay. We had this thing where we went, right, every section within the magazine, from the front right to the back, has to be on 8 or 9s. If it's not, then something's wrong. We'd go back and change it and change it and change it and constantly iterate the print product, which is basically something we had learnt from digital. But for some reason, it just never come back into magazines, this idea that actually you can change magazines. People don't care. As long as it's getting better, people don't care. You can change it. You can keep changing it up as much as you like. And so this was the kind of some of the background research we did, which showed us as well that we had a very strong business case as well, which was really nice. Our users at Time Out do go out and do a lot of stuff, which was really handy when I was going out trying to get investment for the company or things. I could say, look, we've got a perfect audience. We need to write to them. We knew how much they go out. We knew what the kind of things they liked. So we also up-weighted and down-weighted content based on that as well. If you look at Time Out now, some sections in the magazine are bigger than other sections. Some sections we used to have don't exist. And that was purely done on research, but weighted of what do our users actually want? What do the readers want from us? And also we could work out the other things they were doing. That was really important to us, was working out what other stuff are they interested in, where do we sit, what kind of people have we got, and then again writing to them. Who are our competitors as well? Knowing that was really key, and a lot of work was done on what do our competitors do well, how can we do similar things, but do it in a way that Time Out would like. And then we came up with something like this, so it's slightly skewed, which showed us how we created our circle of things, which was basically research. I mean, basically in very, very simple terms, it was find an audience, create content for them, make sure you exploit it right across, you try and get to the widest possible audience, and then how do you bring them back in as well, back into the circle. So lots of feedback as well. So we needed that kind of sense where you're just driving them around time and time again, and then keep building scale every time you do that, build the loop. And where were they, just out of interest? These were the places that Time Out is currently around the world. It's probably, like, so several people in the room who probably know more than me, that's probably expanded more than that now, has it?
107 was the last quote.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things we had to do as well is work out how we could expand quickly across the globe. That was partly to do with the fact that we were private equity funded, and if they want to do an exit, they've just floated. You need to be able to see that you can get scale quickly and come up with formats of doing that. One of the things we did was drop a lot of print. A load of these places don't have print at all. And some of the places that used to have print have gone to a free model. New York went to free as well. To give you an idea, by the way, of the success of the free, once we had done it, in a sense of awards, Time Out was nominated and won Best International Magazine 3 years in a row. It was nominated for Best Magazine in the country. I was nominated for a couple of awards. Thank you. And we just did well, and we won loads of commercial awards, all sorts of things. The only reason I mention that is because Time Out had never won them before. Time Out had never, in the 40 years before that, it had never been nominated for Magazine of the Year out of all the magazines they were around. Once we went to free, I got a load of stick for going free as well, by the way. That goes back to that courage thing. It was the only time I've ever had death threats in my life was when we went free. I had a stalker write to me saying, "What have you done to the magazine I love? I hate you." That was the first one. And then the next one was, he had cut my picture out of the front and then blown it up and then stuck pins in my eyes. And then the last one was, "I know where you come out of the building at night." The only thing with that was that he was a subscriber, and so he was sending these back in his subscriber letter, so we knew who it was. He'd taken his name off it, but he left his subscriber number on, so I got to just give him a ring. And he was hugely apologetic. I had another one where we made a change. We took the TV listings out because actually Time Out was all about going out. This was one of the things as well, of coming up what the core purpose was. And so we realised Time Out was all about going out. We didn't need the TV listings, so we took them out. But some people loved them. So it was there were some people who really liked it. One person loved it so much that he thought it was acceptable to write an email which just had one word on it. And it started with C and ended in unt. And was as big font as he could possibly get. But also his email we had on the database, so that was fine. So I just phoned him up and went, "Hello, I think you've got a problem with the brand." He went, "Who is this?" And I went, "Oh, it's Tim Arthur, I'm the editor-in-chief." And he went, "Yeah, that might have been a bit rude, actually, now I think about it." And then I explained to him why we'd done the changes, and he was fine. And that was one of the things that whenever we did changes, we had to really own the change as well and say, and explain to people why we did them, why it was important we'd done them, what it meant to the business as well. Transparency was a really big thing for me. That we were transparent about the changes and why we did them. That's how we expand around the world. That's where we realised we could move to as well, so that's where hopefully Time Out is moving around. Why we did it? Why we did it? This is just interesting if you're a brand perspective. Why? Because we thought there was huge opportunity. The reason Time Out got bought by private equity was because actually it sits in this incredible sweet spot between local search, digital media, e-commerce, and social communities. Actually, we created with Time Out, and it's right in the process of creating it, something that sits right in the middle, can be the best of all of those, and can solve loads of your problems. If we get that exactly right, and I think the people who've just invested in the float on the stock market realise that that's incredibly valuable, because it means you can not only get to a large audience, you can engage them through social media and make sure they're talking about it all the time. We got the prize for the second best use of social media in the world 2 years ago, I think, for the brand. But also you can sell to them through e-commerce, and you can entertain them through being a brilliant brand. If you get all those things right, you've got a really powerful brand. But that is totally different from where we started as a magazine brand. That's just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, all we had was a magazine that was dying. And what they're trying to build now is this. And actually there's one other thing that Time Out's just about to do. If you go to Lisbon in Portugal, one, do go there, it's a great city. Two, go to the Time Out market. Time Out has a market in Lisbon, which is the best of the city all under one roof. If you want to know the best restaurants in Portugal, go to Time Out market and you can try every single one of them under one space. It's about the size of Spitalfields, it's phenomenal. And they're now going to roll out Time Out markets right around the world. There'll be one in London, there'll be one in New York, Berlin, Tel Aviv, all over the world. Very exciting. That's something that kind of came out as we were developing the vision and as we were moving forward. We realised there was also this thing where, in the same way that people like print, they like live experiences. You lot know that more than anybody, being an events company. But if you can do that combination of content, which is really valuable to them, online, and then give them a live experience as well, live experiences are fantastic for loyalty as well. They love that. Face-to-face stuff with a brand and connection with the brand is great. You get all that right, and then you become successful. That's just my new business, so ignore that. I'm going to very quickly, how am I doing time-wise? I just want to quickly run through the lessons. Good, okay, right. So these are 10 lessons that I learned during my time at Time Out. The dinosaurs became extinct. Sounds really simple, but I went to South by Southwest with Dave, and because of the way brands are created now, brands can be created really quickly. He had a really nice thing where he said 30 years ago it took 30 years to create a brand, 20 years ago it took 20 years to create a brand, 10 years ago 10 years. Now you can create a brand overnight. But you can kill a brand overnight as well. That's one of the things. But it means that you just have to be much more flexible, and you have to be allowed to evolve. And if you get to be a big... One of the problems, if you're a reasonably big brand, like Time Out, is it's quite difficult to move. You become like a big ship. You can't move. And you've got all these startups popping up with fantastic little apps that solve problems all the time. If you can't get that mentality in your head to change, and a willingness to change amongst the audience, amongst your audience to accept that change, and people internally to do that change, then you're in problems. So the Dinosaurs Exist basically meant that we had to understand that we had to fundamentally change. We were quite lucky because we were independent. We weren't part of a big publishing house where we had to get permission off 10 different publishers to do it. We could just choose to do it, and that's why I think we've done so many changes that we did. Quality will outbe excellent. That was the thing. I had a really naff thing I used to say that people used to hate, which was probably like a David Brentism, but it was good enough isn't good enough. So for me, I hated the idea, constantly hated the idea of just work that was all right. You know what I mean? So as an editor, I would constantly throw pieces back, and people would hate it. And they had actually got very autonomous as well. The editors of each section, before I came in, were just very used to not being interfered with, actually. They would do their stuff and they thought it was good enough. My whole aim was to raise the quality. And by doing that, one of the things I was really keen on, particularly when I was editor-in-chief, was winning awards. I wanted to win awards, and it wasn't about awards, because in themselves they're pretty meaningless, but what it is, it's about striving for excellence. It's striving to be brilliant. And one of the ways you can be the purple cow is by being the best at what you do. And that can be a number of things as well, by the way. However you choose to interpret that, that could be, you could be the funniest, you could be the most useful, you could be whatever it is, but it's a constant mindset about being better and better, and just not accepting good enough. One of the things that we used to talk to Dave about, if you're in product development or you work on digital platforms, you will know the phrase minimum viable product. I hate that phrase. I think it's got an inbuilt failure in it. And when I was over in America giving a talk, the guy who was talking to me, talking before me, runs some website that helps you find your ancestors, ancestors.com. Is it that? Ancestry.com, is that what it's called? That may be it. I think that is what it's called. And their whole product team had changed that phrase from minimal viable product to minimum lovable product. And they used, all around their offices, they had this image of a cupcake, because they went, a cupcake is like a perfect small cake. It's not the wedding cake that you might want to build to, but it's a beautiful small thing that is complete. And his idea was never release something which is broken or is fundamentally you're not proud of it. Maybe don't do it with bells and whistles and do everything that's huge, but you can deliver things, but whatever you deliver, make sure they're great and they're perfect. So excellence, I think, is really key. And excellent will out as well. People respond to it. Your audience do know the difference. Your audiences aren't stupid. If you put a great article in front of them and it's really well written, they will read it and they'll appreciate it. Live and work with passion. That was one of the things I think is very key when you're in any organisation. If you're the CEO of any organisation, it's key that you somehow instill that in the people that work for you. And that's not altruism. It's because they work harder for you and they create better stuff. But you have to you have to create an atmosphere where people believe in the product. And often what that's about is making sure they know the journey they're on. They know why they're doing it. They know what they're trying to create. They know what the results are, rather than feel like they're working in a vacuum and not being appreciated. So sometimes it's just about saying, like when you go back to the bit before, you say, I really want excellence from you. If I threw an article back at somebody and they went and rewrote it and came back and it was brilliant, it was about me saying to them, that is a brilliant piece of work. Thank you very much for doing that. And now look at the results as they come in and it's great. But really as well, the other thing I believe with this, you only get one time on this earth anyway. If you're not doing something you're passionate about, go and do something else. And this was one of the things that happened with Time Out. With my teams at Time Out when I took over, I put people into sort of three categories. There were people who were kind of new to Time Out, who got the digital kind of vision for Time Out and were on the journey. Then there were people who'd been at Time Out for a long time, who are willing to learn, willing to accept the change, and were excited about the change. So they were on the journey. And then there were another group. And the other group were people who just liked it as it had always been, didn't want to change, didn't want to learn stuff. And those I used to call energy pirates. And those really you want to leave. You know, not nastily, you just, for them and for the business, it's no good. And I say that heartily to everyone. If you're not enjoying yourselves, move somewhere else. It's better for the business and it's better for you. Or get your head in a space where you go, man, I can achieve loads of things here. And you should have this give and take with any business that you work for, which is, what do I get out of it personally? You get paid, which is a bonus, by the way. That is a good thing. You know, don't ever take that for granted. Somebody is paying you, and you get the advantage to further your career. But then, as much as anything, say, what can I put in? You know, it's really interesting. People often, you know, the worst employees I ever had were people who just about, you know, what am I getting? I'm always hard done by, as opposed to the people who always climb the career were the ones who went, how can I make an impact here? How can I learn? How can I change the business? How can I think differently and help the people around me that I work with? So work with passion. Look outside. Time Out, Time Out was incredibly insular when we started. It had always done something in the same way. It didn't really need to look out for a long time as well because we were successful. And then because of that, because we didn't look at the environment around us, we lost our position. People were better than us, things moved on. And then we had that really hard, it was a much harder journey than it would have been if we'd have realised 5 years earlier that we needed to make the changes than it actually was. And also people come up with things brilliantly all the time. So look around at your competitors, look at who's doing fantastic stuff and just copy what they do. Just copy it. Because when you copy it though, you always copy it with the idea of how do we do that though. So when Time Out went into e-commerce, or when Time Out created a free magazine, that's not new. The free magazine market had been really well established. But it was how does Time Out do it? That will make it successful because then it will become the purple cow. Then it will become something that's unique and brilliant. The idea itself, go into the free market, was just a steal. That was like, well, that's working well for them. We'll have that. And we did that right across the board. There's an amalgamation of ideas. And where you look can be really important as well. If you work in digital stuff, I know some of you do, look at where you look for sites. Don't just look at sites that are based around the UK, look at sites from the States. Don't just look at sites from the States, look at sites from Asia. When Dave and I used to go out occasionally, we'd not go out. I shouldn't have said that, sorry. I don't know why I gave that away. We would travel around the world a lot, and one of the things I found, I can remember going to our Beijing office, and we were going to launch this big global platform with them. We were really excited to show it off, and they kind of looked at it. We did this big presentation that around the rest of the world had gone down a storm. We showed it in Beijing, and they kind of went, yeah, it's all right, yeah. And then we sort of went, yeah, I've been working this for like a year and a half then, it's really exciting, it's going to be brilliant. And they were like, yeah, but we could probably build that in like a couple of weeks. And the idea was actually, it was a good sobering reminder that different parts of the world are evolving much more quickly than other parts of the world, and you can learn from everywhere. Don't be arrogant about it. Keep what valuable, throw everything away. This is about focus. In your job, do this as well. Don't waste time on stuff which isn't going to help you. Prioritise and then just throw everything else away. And be liberated by doing that. It's really nice. Do it around your house as well, it's great. I've got a rule around my house which is a 3-year rule. If I haven't looked at something or played with it or read it for 3 years, I just throw it away. It's really great. Focus on the things that are important. Pare your life down to the things that you love doing, and that happens at work as well. If you don't prioritise what's really important in your work, you just don't get through anything. But it's very easy. Probably not for you. Like you probably work much better than we did at Time Out. But at Time Out, it was very, very easy to be pulled, focus all the time. There are always 10 priorities, when really there should only be like 3 business priorities. And you need to just get rid of the other ones. Focus, and then success will come. It's a conversation. If you're in media now, that is the single biggest change that's happened. We had to learn it very quickly, but it's really important. It is now no longer you just broadcasting what you think about stuff. It is always a conversation. So you need to use that to your advantage, to find out what your audience wants, to then improve your products, to improve your content, and talk to them. And if you ask though, this is one of the other things, if you ask your audience for information or for advice or what they think of your product, then you have to be prepared to change. There's nothing worse than asking somebody their opinion, and they go, well, I think you should do this, and then you just go, well, that's your opinion. You know, if you do that, it disengages them as well. They feel disempowered by it. Whereas actually you can make your audience now, through conversation, ambassadors for your brands. That's the amazing thing. If you get people on side, if you engage them, if you listen to them. When I was editor-in-chief, and actually when I was CEO as well, I did quite a lot of, if complaints came into the business, I would deal with them myself. I would write back to the person, I would phone the person up. And then 9 times out of 10, that person who'd called me a name, I could turn around in 10 minutes by explaining stuff to them. And not only would I turn it around that they would be okay with it, they would then go out and tell people. Time Out's a great brand. The actual editor-in-chief just phoned me up and said, this is why they did that. I get that, that makes sense. But it's a conversation. Always remember that. Don't let the tail wag the dog. This sometimes comes up. This is about process sometimes. People, and it can be done from a number of areas, but we had it sometimes with product, you might have it sometimes with commercial. Product will go, we're going to build this fantastic thing. And you'd go, right, why are you building it? Because we think it's a great thing. Okay, well, let's work out if it is a great thing first. And work out if our content teams can actually build stuff for it. It's all about getting the process right. Sometimes you will end up writing things because you're on a deadline. And you'll just go like, I've just got to get it written. It's much better to do the preparation for it first. You know, scope out your articles, then write the thing, then think of the, get the audience in mind so you know exactly what the audience wants. Then you build it, and then you exploit it. But it's very easy. If a business is moving really quickly and you're growing really quickly, which I think you guys are, it's very easy for different departments to pull away, and they just start building stuff, because otherwise sometimes product teams and development teams sometimes are really bad for it, because otherwise they're just sitting on, they're just twiddling their thumbs. But you need to get it so it's working, so it works that way. Never assume anything. That's the fantastic thing about it sort of goes back to the conversation piece. Don't make assumptions anymore. You don't have to. Just find out the information. Don't make assumptions. Assumptions are just the death of anything at the moment. Take everyone with you. That's really key, that everyone gets on board, that you work as a team. We worked very much in silos at Time Out for ages. Product team, commercial team, content team, marketing team, all working separately. Actually, when it worked really well, it was when we all worked together, and we all work together under a single vision as well. And that's really important. When you do any project, before you start the project, it goes back a little bit to don't let the tail wag the dog. Before you start any project, the project leader should tell you why you're doing it. This is what we're trying to create. This is what good looks like. And as long as you know that, and that's something I would ask, by the way, as well. If you're not a manager, if you're not a management level, but you're giving tasks, if you're not quite sure, just say, what does good look like? What will a positive result be for you? If the person can't answer that, you shouldn't start doing a project. Yeah, they should be able to say, yes, it would be great. It would look like this many people reading this article. It would be this conversion. It would be whatever would be good. But at every level of the business, people should be able to know, one, their role in it and what they're trying to achieve, and what the company's trying to achieve as well. It's quite difficult to do that. I wasn't great at a time at various periods of time because the business was moving so fast. And you'd have an exec who were kind of making big decisions and moving it forward, and you'd be raising funds, and then you suddenly remember that Lou on the front desk doesn't know what's going on. And why Lou on the front desk is vital is because she is the first person that anyone sees. And actually, she's a really good weather vane for if you have this thing working. If Lou can tell you what the business is about, then everyone else should be able to. And that's quite important. So take everyone with you. And finally, there's no hierarchy of good ideas. Good ideas can come from every single place. Lou on the front desk at Time Out could come up with an amazing idea which could transform the business. Everybody from Lou up to the CEO could do that. And you have to be open to that as well. And actually, you as members of staff should feel like if you think hard enough about the business, if you're a problem solver, you can come up with one thing which will change your business. And there is nothing that anyone above you likes more than a great idea, as long as they're humble enough to accept it. The story I've got that's a bit like this is Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce, the plane side of Rolls-Royce. I was a playwright in a former life, and I was working on a play with Rolls-Royce. I went into work in their factory for a bit to see how things worked, and they were talking about this very thing. They had spent, I think, something in the region of £10 million at that point, trying to come up with a solution for a cone that would go on that goes on the end of the rotor blades for the engine. You've seen it. It's like a little bit on the end, yeah? And what was happening was, as it was flying through altitude, a load of ice was building up on there because it's really cold in the air, and that ice would flake off and it would hit the blades, the rotor blades, and it would shorten the rotor blade's life. And so what they were trying to do was come out with a heating mechanism that would go inside this cone that could work separately from the overall engine. It's a massive piece of engineering. They'd already spent like 10 million quid on it, and they still hadn't come up with a great solution for it. But a new person came in who was on a work experience scheme, and just when they were talking about that, he put his hand up and said, well, you know, if you make it out of rubber, it'll just bobble up and down and nothing will form on it. And so if you look now at Rolls-Royce planes, when you get on it, that little tip there is just made out of rubber. There's nothing inside it, no heating mechanism. It costs about £5 to make, a thing that they were going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds making each unit, and it just bobbles up and down. But this was just a guy who came in, saw a problem, and happened to come up with a solution. The good thing about Rolls-Royce is they were open enough to hear that idea from somebody and went, wow, that's amazing. And it saved them a massive amount of money and did transform that little part of their business. And I think we did, yeah, it's great, isn't it? And I think the good thing, we had an innovation prize. Is it still running at timeout? Is it? No, is it? Is it a bit? We had one. You know, these things are great ideas. I still love the innovation prize. We had it right around the world, and it was this idea that anybody in the whole business could come up with one idea, and that we would not only would we give them money for coming up with an idea as well. It was a competition right across, but it was anyone. It could be Lou here. It could be the CEO of Time Out Australia. It could be anybody actually at all. If they just had one idea that would change the business, we'd want to hear it. And one of the reasons for doing that, though, is just getting this idea of innovation in people's minds, of things changing. It goes right back to that first thing about dinosaurs. People have to accept now that the world changes, and it changes very quickly. And your culture within any business now has to be adaptable. And you, as people working in businesses, have to be adaptable and understand that you've constantly got to learn new skills. You've constantly got to be updated, especially if you're in media, on how do people want to get their information. It is fundamentally transformed in the last 10 years, from reading magazines to pressing buttons and expanding stuff on phones. That is, I mean, it's a mind-boggling change, but it's something that you lot take for granted. You now do that. Babies grow up and they do that at television screens because they expect that they can make it expand, or they, you know, do things. They expect different ways. As virtual reality comes in, as artificial intelligence comes in, all these things will change your businesses fundamentally. When it goes back to that piece about working with passion, what you have to see that is as phenomenal opportunities to make amazing content, to make content in ways that you've never been able to before. You know, you will be within the next 5 years, be able to create the kind of content that you would see in science fiction movies. And that is an amazing opportunity. What it isn't is an opportunity to go, oh, I've got to learn another thing. You know, it's actually just a way to transform your creativity and to use it to create amazing things. And if you can do that, you'll have an amazing business. That's really it, I think. Is that all right? That's what I was going to say. Done. There you go.
Any questions? Anybody brave enough to ask questions? Tim, one in the front. Yeah.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. You talked about how it was when you went free, you got like external haters. Was it hard also convincing people internally, because they'd obviously were used to this revenue
Yes.
coming from the magazine, and how did you manage that?
Yes, it was. It was. It was really hard. Because people didn't want to do it. I mean, that was the kind of key thing. Partly because you're transforming the format as well. So again, loads of people had worked on the magazine for 20, 25 years actually. And what you have to do though is listen to what their concerns are. Because sometimes they've got really good, valid concerns. There was no point at which I just bulldozed people and went, oh, what do you know? Because actually loads of them have been there for longer than me, and they knew what the DNA of the brand was. So sometimes most of their concerns were about, but we'll lose what Time Out is. And so then it was my job to go, okay, well, let's talk about what it is. I want to hear what you're saying, and this is my solution to solving that problem. Are we on the same page then? And more often than not, that was the case. And some of it, though, in the end, was a leap of faith, because they knew if we failed, the brand goes down. It was as big as that when we went free. I didn't talk about the circulation difference, by the way. So we had been 36,000 circ just before we went free, and then next week, our circulation was 300,000. With a readership of 500,000. So it was an enormous shift from audience point of view. And again, they got that. But the proof then would be they sort of trusted me. They trusted the vision. A lot of it was about communication and listening. And then it was constantly feeding back afterwards as well of this is working, that's not working. Yes, we are making money. No, we're not making money. It was quite honest about that as well, so people knew. And then feeding on what was successful. There were definitely people who didn't like it internally. But again, it's those kind of three categories of people. People that buy it straight away, people that you can persuade and they'll come along. And then there were some people who just didn't want to do it. At which point, then both the company and the person has to go, well, we're at sort of an impasse actually. If neither of us want to do it, if you don't want to do it and you don't want to be here, then how do we work that out? But
when you were doing the modelling for the new budget, how did you work that out? Was it based on additional revenue? You know, that's quite a big, brave step to go from 36,000 to 300,000. How do you cost up that budget to say it's going to be increasing in revenue, it's going to be, you know, where to get that number?
Well, we did a lot of the modelling based around stuff that was out in the market as well. So we had examined all the major mags that were in the free market and looked at percentages of their ad revenue for a start. I mean, the thing we were giving up, of course, was any subscription money or people paying for the mag. It was all going to go to an ad-based model. So we modelled it up of just went costs, how much we had to bring in each week from advertising to cover our costs. We also then modelled the impact that it would have on digital, because we did a sort of multiplier effect. We were pretty conservative, I think, and then what extra advertising would come in from that, what potentially we'd get from conversion to ticket sales. It was pretty well, I mean, we had a great finance team who did that in detail, but we costed out every single bit of it, and we were quite conservative we didn't think the magazine was going to be as successful as it was, actually. In all honesty, when we went to do the free, we thought if it broke even, that would be great, because what the effect it would have on the rest of the business would be phenomenal. Actually, as it turned out, the magazine smashed all expectations and really went over. But there was still a bit, though, of we had to, there were unknowns. It wouldn't have worked if we hadn't got all the major West End agencies on board for advertising, because we didn't have them on board before. We just weren't big enough. But that was about having a whole ad strategy then as well of, right, these are the teams that are going to go in and explain the new product to the teams. I went out personally, both as editor-in-chief and as CEO, and met all the big agencies. I went around and did an agency roadshow every 6 months to say, this is what we've done, this is what we're creating, and getting people on board. It was just a lot of hard graft. But we'd done the modelling. We knew what success, you knew that there was definitely the potential to do it. We knew that other people in the market were making money from it, and we modelled basically around on those expectations. It was a major piece of work, but in the end it sort of paid off. Well, not sort of paid off, it definitely paid off. So, hello.
Thank you, Tim. If you hadn't had that burning platform, if you hadn't had that real decline in the circ and the advertising revenues, how do you think it would have worked out? What would Tone have done then?
Well, if we'd have had to have changed anyway. I think the only way that we wouldn't have been in a situation where we'd had the burning platform is if we'd have adapted and changed earlier. So if we'd have been smarter earlier in our career, we wouldn't have got to the position we were in. There was no reason really for Time Out to get to that position where the mag was going down, we were not having a lot of money, and we weren't adapting. We should have, previous management teams or or just the way it had worked shouldn't have taken for granted the good times. I think that's one of the things that I learned, was that a lot of people, when we were making money and we had a large audience, just didn't future plan. They didn't kind of go, well, this can't last forever. They just sort of assumed it would. And then right from underneath them, everything changed. And so I guess it would have just been future-proofing, would have been looking out. But now, because of the way digital works, you sort of have to do that constantly. I guess maybe how would you foresee how massive the change would be in media? But what's been interesting, that dinosaur slide, is the fact that there still are media companies who don't who don't change, who don't evolve, who are still using revenue models that don't work and are busted old models, or have taken busted models for revenue from print and then put that model onto digital, and they're not replicable and they don't work. And it's because they're unwilling to change. And so I guess I think we would have come to that point anyway. And I think a lot of major media companies, really big media companies, will come to that point. There's this whole thing now about free media. My daughter doesn't pay for anything. I mean, it's true. Actually, I'm paying for everything. I mean, I don't even pay for her clothes. But she isn't used to paying for media. It's You know, if she wants to listen to a band, she will maybe pay for Spotify, but a lot of the time she watches, I mean, she gets her music now from YouTube. You know, she would just put a playlist together on YouTube or go onto a YouTube channel and just play all their artists. You know, she's not used to it. So fundamentally, people have to be aware of the changing models and then jump on board and get excited by it and then go, right, what can we do? And those are the ones that will win. The ones that I think will be successful are the ones who are always thinking ahead and are finding the space to do that as well. That's the really tricky thing, particularly, which again is that thing about planning. When you're in the good times, plan forward rather than when you're in that stage where things are tough. Because when you're tough, the things that can sometimes go are the bits which are play, where you just go, let's try some stuff out. What would that? You know, let's imagine what that might be like. All that creativity can get really squeezed as soon as revenue gets really tight. But that stuff is the future of your business. But where we'd have been, I think the platform definitely helped. I mean, it gave us such a kick. That burning platform, that we had no choice but to change. But I think we would have got there anyway at a certain point, as most media companies are getting to that thing of going, shit, the business model doesn't work anymore.
So do you think that the FT will eventually change their model?
No, I mean, it depends. I mean, it totally depends. I think there are two models in media at the moment that can work. There's a mass model, which I think has to be free or subscription based, a bit like Spotify. I think will work really well. But other than that, it's free, and then work out how you get other money from people. Or you've got a core smaller audience that really want the thing you've got, that's you know, and they're really loyal to it, and they will pay a premium then as well. Those two businesses, a kind of small model business with a loyal audience, or a mass business, those will work. It's the ones in between that are getting squeezed and losing. So it just depends which way you go.
Tim, you mentioned earlier that you want to create content that appealed to a mass
Yeah.
consumer. Is there a particular process you went through to kind of figure out what that content actually was?
Yes, absolutely. We started off by looking at what we meant by mass. So it didn't mean everyone, because you can't be all things to all people. So, but there was a much bigger audience that we could have been talking to, and that was people who go out. So that was kind of, and I say that because that sounds like you may go, well, that's everyone. That's not everyone. Right? Believe me, like, you know, I'm now 45. I've now got my life. I've come back to going out, but for a long time when I was bringing up my daughter, I really wanted to take away and just get home and watch a film. They weren't, when I was that period, I wasn't a time out person. So we first of all said, who would use the kind of products that we've got? And then we did a load of research on those people and worked out how broad that could be. And then what we did was we had a lot of user profiles. So we had, I think, 4 people that were up around the office. It was like, I can't remember their names, but they all had names. And when I was an editor, I could then say to the writers, but how does this help Jane? How does this make Pete's life better? And we broadened it out, and we got to know them as well. That was the whole thing. We got to know the products they use. We know what they like, what kind of films they liked. Also understanding that people are really broad as well. So we would often write in the old time out about like a French film that had just come out, and that might appeal to Jane. She might like that, but Jane could also like a really big blockbuster as well. Actually, people don't work in these little things. Actually, they've got quite broad taste, but it's understanding them and then writing in a language that they want as well. And that was really important. We had a big thing at Time Out of getting rid of any kind of jargon at all. If everybody didn't understand it when they read it, I didn't want our film critics writing something where they used a name or something which just showed how clever they were. And that was like, no, I don't care about that, because a film aficionado will still read it and like it if it's well written, but somebody who isn't interested in film, you should make them want to go and see it. And I didn't mind if it was a bizarre, if it was quite a niche film that the film editor thought was amazing and thought that everyone should go and see it, I'd want him to write it in a way that would make everybody want to go and see it then. And it was about just broadening out that appeal, but it really came back to knowing that audience. It was really identifying them, splitting them up, knowing the differences and what they needed, how they needed the content, because we wrote for different sections on different platforms. There used to be, again, it feels like such a long time ago to even be talking about it, but it's not really, where there was this myth in media that you would be able to write an article and you just press a button and it would publish to every platform, and it'd be the same, and you could write the same article. That's just not true, because social media, you need to talk differently to people than you do in a magazine article, than you do in a blog post, than you do in a listing, whatever it would be. They're different ways of writing. The pain in the arse is the reason people wanted that to be true is because when you're a CEO, you didn't want somebody to have to write 4 different pieces, because you go, well, that's going to take ages. How can this possibly work? it's sort of tough titty. That's how it works. It's like you actually have to do it, or you have to write it in a way that people can digest it. So in the magazine, we created a piece which is called The Bottom Line, which, because of the way people were using magazines, we realised that they were used to using digital. So actually what they wanted was just tell me what it is. So rather than read the whole article, we did the bottom line. So if you wanted to review in Time Out, I think it's still in it, if you read it, if you just want to know, is the film any good, it'll say 4 stars, and then you can read the bottom line and it says, action movie, good for a night out with the lads, whatever it would be. But if that's enticing enough, you'll go back and read the whole piece at a certain length. Online, what we did, we took that line and put that at the top, because that's the first thing you want to know. You want to tease people into it. Also knowing, sadly, for writers, that often that's the only thing they're going to read. You don't have time anymore as a writer to write stuff, like to write a big piece of exposition for 500 words before you say, this actually happened, by the way. So I was reading one of our art reviews of an exhibition, and it was 500 words before the person told me that it was an exhibition of paintings. He was just telling me that it was like this, and it was this, and it was kind of emotions and things like that, but at no point did he go, this is an exhibition of paintings. It took me 500 words, and I went, just say that at the start. Just tell me what it is. Tell me how it's going to make me feel as well. And that was the combination. That's when you win in content, I think, is if you can inform people, and you tell them something they don't know, but you tell them how they're going to feel as well. If you can get that combination of, this is going to emotionally move you, but it's also going to change, it's also good for information, that's your winner then. But you do have to emotionally engage people, and that's where creativity comes out. That's why great writers move you. If you're not moved by something, you don't do it. But those are the ways we did it.
There's a challenge of growing content, like having the great content that you've understood and put together, but then actually reaching that wider audience. Like, how do you get it out of the bubble that it exists in and get it to more people, because it's there and it's great, but
that was working with the marketing team, really. That was making sure that people understood that marketing had a massive role. One of the roles that we put in that hadn't existed before was a marketing person that worked directly in the content team. So it wasn't actually separate, and was doing it on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis. And actually, I think that was one of the mistakes we made while I was still there, is we took that role out. We hadn't really worked out how valuable that role was, because that person was constantly going around saying, see, if you just put that article up, actually, if you just change this headline up there, that's going to get more traction. We did a lot of gap analysis. We did all sorts of things. We pushed it through social media. We did a content calendar that was really detailed, so we'd know what time of year somebody wanted to read something. All those things, that planning became really, really key. But that was how marketing and content, being one team, not separate teams, would work, because it breaks down. If the content team just creates something and then hand it to marketing, it's too late by then. Those basic things, which you'll all know now, but again, it was all new to us when we started doing it. The fact that you'd have to write Christmas content in June to make sure that it was up on the site so that it could build up enough kind of SEO that in December, when people were really looking for it, it was coming high enough in search results. Those things were really important. It was a massive fundamental shift. It also meant that we published every Tuesday. So I had a talk which became infamous in Time Out, called the See You Next Tuesday talk, which basically meant that it wasn't, the cycle that we worked at wasn't about that. It wasn't about, here's our content, now we'll see you next Tuesday. It was about the fact that actually you had to do minute by minute content, daily content that was going up, but you also had to be doing long-term planning, which the marketing team would tell you about, which would say, this is when you need to put that article up. And some people would find it really weird in Time Out, because they were used to working on a magazine thing. They were like, why am I writing Christmas content in June? But it's like, if you don't write it now, by the time you get to do it in December, nobody's going to find it. It's not going to be on the Google searches. So it was that real hand-in-hand work with marketing. Anyone? Sorry, yes.
The Time Out market you mentioned.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the whole idea behind it, and also the interaction between the Time Out Live and then the digital community and the magazine?
Yes.
How does that work? What's the benefit, I guess, for both?
Time Out Market came about because the person who's the editor-in-chief of Time Out Portugal, a guy called João Cepeda, just had it as an idea. It was just one of those kind of things where he said he'd been offered a building, actually. That was it. In Lisbon, had gone broke. It was one of these, sometimes in businesses, you just have to find, things appear, opportunities appear, and you have to have the vision to go, actually, I could really exploit that. That could be amazing. And no, we haven't thought of doing that, but why not? And basically, the town council in Lisbon had this huge space, the kind of size of Spitalfields Market, and it was run down and derelict. Everyone was broke in the city because their economy was in the toilet. And they put out a thing saying, does anybody want to tender for this to take it over? And João just went, well, we do these. Oh, what they did is they had been doing these incredible parties. So once a year, they would do a party in Lisbon. And you couldn't buy tickets to it. You had to be invited, which is a really neat trick because people were desperate to come to it then. It was like the coolest party. But one of the things they would do is they would bring a lot of like the best restaurants and the best things like that at this place. And that was things that people loved. They'd get there and go, wow, it's like the best of the city in this party. And so the combination of being offered this space and this kind of idea, and he went, why not? I think we could do that. And it actually, at that point, in that particular space, wasn't a massive, relatively wasn't a massive investment, as the way it would be in London or New York or somewhere. You know, actually it was relatively easy. And so he came and he brought it back to us as an idea. I remember going and seeing it and looking, that must have been 5 years ago, I looked at the plans. We looked at the business plan, made it up. We got people in who are experts at running markets, because we're not. But again, it goes back to that idea of how would Time Out do it? Why would Time Out do that? What would be different about a Time Out market? And the idea that he had, and it was totally his idea, it was a brilliant idea, was that it would be the only editorial market in the world. That what we're known for, Time Out, is recommendations, saying these are the best things in the city. So you couldn't buy, like the party where you couldn't buy tickets for it, you had to be invited. He did exactly the same thing with all the chefs. So he went round the best restaurants that the editor, our editor of Time Out said, these are the best restaurants in Lisbon. And then he said, you've got 5 stars, you're allowed in our market. And so if you go to it, the reason I'm happy to recommend it as well is because it's an editorial product. It's exactly the same as the magazine. It's not different. It's not a different business. It's the business transformed into a different area. And it's brilliant. And what they've done fantastically there, though, is combine their use of their magazine, the use of social media particularly, and the live to cross over all the time. So they will push from the magazine, they'll push down to events that are on in the marketplace. In the marketplace, there's loads of things where you can tweet, and they want you to interact with it in digital format. And it just works. But that was a bit of a punt. It was a bit of a kind of like, yeah, I think it should work. But it's now, I think it's now the second or first most visited tourist attraction in Lisbon? Yeah, I mean, so it's really slammed it. But it's brilliant, and you can't not, and it works as well. And this is one of the other things that Time Out we had to look at, was it works for locals and for tourists. And Time Out as a brand, if it does it really well, can do both. And that's kind of a unique position as well. We should know the city. You know, if you're a tourist and you use Time Out, you should feel like you're getting to know the insider, information about the city. It helps you live like a local. If you're a local, it should make you feel like a tourist, in as much as a tourist comes to a city and goes, wow, this place is incredible. I didn't even know there was this or that. And Time Out, when it does it well, can do both. It can show both sides. But it was very much, it was just an idea that was hatched by João. It was a brilliant idea. We gave it the go-ahead. And then the nice thing is we can incubate it as well. It sort of is a bit like that idea of minimum lovable product. In Lisbon, it didn't cost a lot to do it. It's not a huge, huge space, and we could develop it as a concept and sort of demo it. It also, to be honest, wouldn't really, if it failed, it wouldn't really affect the rest of the business in the same way that it might do if we did it in London. If it closed, we wouldn't lose as much money, it wouldn't affect the brand as much. What we did do is incubate it there. It's a fantastic idea, and now we'll roll it around the world. So.
When is it coming to London?
Because I don't work at Time Out anymore, I'm not sure, but I think pretty soon. I know that, yeah, well, I mean, it will be pretty soon, I think. One of the reasons they did the float that they did 2 weeks ago was to raise money for the markets. And I believe they have a site, and so they'll be building it soon. But these things, they take, I mean, that's another time scale thing. It's not like a digital product or a mag that comes out, that will take probably a year and a half to build, I would think. So, but I would think it would be within the next 2 years, definitely. It'll be fab.
Just for some context, so we've got a lot of content that we've been using for a few years, and we completely repurpose in the way we distribute our content now in the way that we kind of package it for our audience. But when you guys got that period where you realized that you need to make a change, there must have been a large part of the audience that you lost. What would you say might have been a couple of tips or something that, like, how do you re-engage that audience that maybe didn't trust or didn't read your content anymore?
Yeah, so we in the same way, we basically had 3 audiences that we looked at when we were doing our research for the magazine and then for the expansion on the website. That was current users. Why are they using it? How are they using it? What do they want from us? What are they liking? What are they not liking? Lapsed users. And then the main question we wanted to know from them is, why aren't you using us anymore? And then the bigger market, which was like people who didn't use us, and how could we capture them? Why aren't they using it at all? Why have they never been introduced to the brand? And then we built all the content around there. We weren't that worried about losing people. Mainly because actually when we did if you just took the magazine as a specific, it had 36,000 people anyway. Some of them were hardcore time-outers. The nice thing about a brand like Time Out is people live the brand. So some people, they've been with us for 40 years. You can change it a lot, they'll grumble a lot, but they won't actually leave. You never want to take people for granted, but you know that. But if you're going for a big prize, you know, we were going from 36,000 to 300,000 readers. Actually, we knew that 250,000 of those readers would some of them, well, maybe 200,000 would be brand new to the brand as well. So we were taking the best of it and reinventing it and then trying to attract a brand new audience. So we weren't that worried about losing people. But also because what was really important was that DNA. It was understanding what people loved about Time Out. Those people who really loved it was going, yes, but what do you love specifically? And then persuading them, you know, if we change it like this, that's not going to lose the bit you love. You're still going to find amazing things. But it was also a case of trial and error as well. Trial and testing, I guess. You know, as we launched new products, you could see how they were doing. Digital is much more effective on that. If we did our blog particularly, I used the blog as one of our success stories at Time Out. We had 2 people working on the blog. One person originally, Sonia Barber. She's probably the best blog writer, I would say, in London, definitely. She's amazing. But that was a lot of trial and error. You know, she put blog posts out at different times. Some took, some didn't. She put things out in, you know, different subject matters. And over a period of time, she learnt what worked well, what our audience wanted. We asked our audience specifically as well, what do you want from us? And then honed the content towards that. But it was constant, it was that thing of a conversation, that you're constantly listening to your audience. And like I said, people that were really pissed off with it, I'd want to know why as well. I never took any, I mean, I still don't. I think it's really important for a business. If somebody complains about you, that is, I know it's horrible enough, but it's just an opportunity to learn. You know, again, that idea of good ideas can come from anywhere. They can come from outside the business. If somebody phones up and says, you're doing this really badly, it's crap, a really bad business will go, what do you know? You know, a good business will go, okay, explain it to me. Why is that bad? Right, how could we do it better? You know, or this is why we do that. You know, have you thought about doing it this way? And just not making any assumptions. And so a lot of stuff we learned from our audience. You know, user groups were really humbling. We'd bring in groups of 10 people at a time. One of the things we did with like the music department just wasn't getting the right tone. And, you know, all our research said that our people were really into music, like they really loved music. And so our music department were writing stuff for what they thought that meant. And they were making assumptions about that. So they would write about a band, like a new band that nobody had heard of, that had only done like 4 gigs, and they'd rave about that. And they'd go, yeah, but our audience are really into music, so they'd want that. But actually, when you say to them, the next follow-up question is, okay, you're really into music. Yes, I'm really into music. What bands do you like? And they went, I'm really into music. I love Coldplay, I like Oasis, I like Beyonce, and then that is a totally different understanding of what it means to really like music than our music team had. Because our music team loved tiny, obscure indie bands. But it was quite difficult, unless I sat the music team down with a user group and let them actually talk to them. And then sometimes it was about them learning, okay, well, I want to write about that little band, and that little band will become a Coldplay, or not, as the case may be, and this is why you should get to know them. So it was talking to the audience in a language that will inspire them, that will make them want to do something, rather than feel excluded. Too many times with our content, we just excluded people by trying to be too cool, actually, and it was letting people in. But it's that constant feedback, really, which is quite unusual. Any last ones? Yes.
I think with digital, my experience has been that it's a great medium to work in because it's got so many opportunities that you can move into really quickly, which has kind of been a double-edged sword. So for me, it's kind of a constant struggle to figure out like which are the different new opportunities or products that we should be looking at and researching into, which are the ones which maybe we save for a rainy day. I was wondering what your process was over that.
It's tricky. It goes back to that focus thing. We weren't very good at it. So one of the things, some of these lessons, by the way, which is that thing of like, what's the one about do things well and throw everything else away? Where is it? Keep what's valuable and throw everything else away. Yeah, that is something that I learned through the process of us not doing that, of trying to do too many things. Of social media is really interesting in that particular sphere, because something will pop up and you sort of go, oh, we've got to be on Periscope, we've got to be on whatever it be, Snapchat, we've got to be on loads of things. And actually, there comes a point when you just have to look at resources as well. As a business, you have to go, well, we can't be across all these, so which are the ones that we can do, and let's do that really, really well. But at the same time, you do have to have an awareness and keep having awareness of the space that if Instagram starts to gain traction and then does what it's just done, is just explode, then at a certain point you change your strategy. You go, okay, actually we're going to do, you will see, I predict within the next 2 years, Twitter will fade and disappear. It's on a downward trajectory now. I think it will more or less disappear. Other ones will come up. And so at a certain point, you have to jump ship and you retrain and you do things. But you cannot cover, unless you've got huge unlimited resources, you cannot cover all the things. And it is just about prioritizing. And it goes back to that thing as what does good look like? So you go, what are we trying to achieve by this? Is it size of audience? Is it depth of engagement? What is it conversion? Whatever that is. And then you look at what are the tools that are going to get us there most effectively. But if you try and cover all your bases too much, you just lose focus. You can't do it. But I think it always goes back to the thing of what are we trying to achieve, and then working out which bits will help you do that. Not easy though. Yes.
You speak passionately about engendering a culture where everyone can bring an idea to the table. I think that's a wonderful thing. Planning's great at it. It's a hindsight question, I suppose. What was the best idea that was brought to you that you actually never took up and maybe wish you had done?
Oh God, I didn't take up. I've got a few that I did take up that I wish I hadn't done. What would be one that we didn't take up? Our problem is we took too many up. What would it have been?
Well, we never actually implemented the innovation prize with it, which we promised.
Oh, that would be right. Oh, and the other one that I genuinely did believe. Yeah. We didn't do that. That would be right. We didn't do that. And the other one that kicks me, which I still believe for Time Out is a brilliant space, but I had a disagreement with the chairman about it, and he may well have been right. He's a very, good business with Time Out dating. We had a very good dating solution, and we had an audience that we knew were predominantly single, and we had an audience that wanted to go out. And I think Dave thought as well, the two of us thought that we were perfectly, just drag him in, it wasn't just me, thought we were perfectly positioned if we could come up with a great dating solution to combine not only matching people who had similar kind of likes and interests, because we knew what they did and where they went out and things like that. So and that's quite nice. One of the hard things about dating is you don't really know the person, but actually if you could know their interests properly, rather than just you read a bit, where it just says, oh, I like music. Actually, we can say these are the gigs that are on them. You might like to go to that together. You might like to do this. That we could match people really well in a kind of fun way as well. We're using the humour that Time Out had, using some of the technology and things we'd learnt from the way dating was moving into things like Tinder. So it had to be really quick and easy to do. So we learnt all those things. But we could also, as a business, do that thing which Tinder's having real difficulty with, which is working out how you make any money from it. So Tinder's got a fantastic, I don't know how many of you are on Tinder, but I'm willing to bet, without even saying, there must be 6 people on here at least in this room that are on Tinder. That is how successful Tinder is. But the thing that Tinder hasn't worked out yet is how to make any money. It is the biggest dating platform in the world, and it's losing money because it's no conversion. There's no advertising on it. No people aren't paying to use it. It's fantastic. We had an idea that we could do the same sort of thing, totally free, but we would have done a premium platform that had a bit more depth. Entry would be a bit like Tinder, but it'd have a bit more depth to it. But we would make money out of monetizing the events they went to. So we'd say, right, we can get you the ticket for this gig if you want to, or we'll book that restaurant for you, or we would enter into that bit. And actually, we'd be offering a service that would be worth paying for, and only a little bit because they'd already booking it. Like if it was a booking for a restaurant, we would take a little bit of the booking fee for the restaurant. That would be that, that's how we would do it. So that was the concept. But so I sort of regret not doing that. But it does go back to this. It would have become a massive business on its own, and could have diverted our focus. Having said that, the markets business is a massive business on its own, and we went for it. So dating, I would have really liked to see how that would have played out, but we pulled it.
Can I have one question?
Yeah.
Can I take you back to your presentation? At the
Yeah.
very beginning, you talked about how you left and went back to Time Out, and then you said you're out. I just wondered whether that was a political embedded comment.
No.
It's not a question you have to answer.
No, I think I'm only out because, like, every time I went back to time out, I went back slightly higher. And this time I've been, like, global CEO, so I don't know, you know, and unless I went back to be CEO, but I don't think...
If it was a political
Oh, what?
command.
Oh, no, it wasn't a command. No, I wasn't told to go. No. Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't told to go. No, I asked to go. I mean, I could be honest about that as well. What did you mean?
Not me today.
Brexit.
Oh, Brexit. Oh, no, I won't even talk about that. I can't even talk about Brexit. I'm actually, weirdly enough, I'm not allowed to talk about Brexit
No, you're not.
because of my job.
Yeah.
So my job on the BBC means that I'm not allowed to... I know that because I put some stuff up on Facebook and I was told to take it down. So I'm not allowed to have an opinion. I have an opinion, though, but I'm not allowed to.
That's why
So.
I said you didn't have to.
Thank you. And I'm still not going to answer it. It's good.
So, bars open for till 7. So please have another drink if you can. Tim will no doubt be
I'll say
willing
that
and
for
able
more.
to answer some more questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, by the way, guys. Thank you. It's been great. It's been really nice to meet you. Thank you.